Welcome to Journeys Through Sociology, a series of interviews with the Executive Committee of the International Sociological Association. I'm Lale Beybohanyan, and our guest today is Dr. Dilek Cindoglu, who is joining us from Ankara, Turkey. Dr. Cindoglu is a professor in the Department of Political Science at Bilkent University. She began her training in sociology at Boğaziçi University in Istanbul before going on to earn her PhD at the State University of New York. Her research has focused on gendered processes of politics, labor markets, migration, and health and sexuality. Thus, she's done a wide range of research, from focusing on women's reproductive health in Turkey to issues affecting women in the labor market, to debates around the headscarf, to name just a few. Dr. Cindoglu has also done extensive policy work, having served as a consultant on gender issues for the UN, the World Bank, the EU, and a range of governmental and non-governmental organizations. And in addition to serving on the ISA's Executive Committee, she's also on the Executive Board of the Turkish Sociological Association. Thank you so much for joining us today, Dr. Cindoglu.
Well, thank you for having me.
It's a pleasure. And as we often do in these interviews, I'd actually like to begin with the present before I start to ask about your journey through sociology. So could you maybe begin by just sharing with us something about some of the work that you're most excited about right now?
Well, at the moment, I've just I'm in the process of putting together a book on the labor market processes and how gendered they are in the Turkish context. I have been looking at different labor market segments. I looked at the women in the sales jobs in two different times. I looked at the women in professional jobs in a couple of different research in the last 20 years. Now I'm writing a book discussing, kind of putting all these findings together and trying to make sense of this, the hurdles and the problems that limits women's access to labor market processes. And how Islam and secularism, how the macro political processes had an influence on this individual lives of women.
And so for our viewers who may not really, have that much knowledge about the labor market in Turkey and some of the implications that has for women, could you just maybe share a couple of the insights that you draw on in your book?
Of course, so in the last 80 years, after the establishment of the Turkish Republic, women have been present in basically two segments of the labor market. One sector is something that you can imagine, that is the agriculture. Women worked heavily on the fields. In agriculture, most of the time as an unpaid laborer. And also women with higher education participated to the labor market. And that participation was around like 80%. In other words, 80% of professional women were participating to the labor market processes. So the group in between, in terms of education, the women who have lesser education, like high school graduates or primary school graduates, were not really entering to the labor market. So that has been the structure in the last, as I've said, since like in the last 8 years. What is interesting now is that with this headscarf ban debate in Turkey, which the ban was limiting women's access to public sector jobs. And I've conducted a research 2 years ago discovering that headscarf ban had also have an impact on professional women's access to labor market, even in the private sector, not necessarily, well, we already know that the public sector is off the limits for headscarf women, but in the professional, in the private sector as well. So that kind of made me think about, about Islam and secularism and traditional gender values and how women negotiate, where is agency, where is structure, that sort of questions, yeah.
So, and clearly, so you think as a sociologist about these issues and about the relationships between different sectors and the role of all of these larger kind of institutional or macro forces, which is a good segue into, the next question I wanted to ask you is, what was it that led you to becoming a sociologist, and what is it that draws you to thinking about these issues in this particular kind of way?
Well, I decided to be a sociologist, I guess, when I was in college or high school. Way back when I was like late 1970s, we are talking about. And when people were asking me, what would you like to study in college, it was very clear to me that I wanted to study sociology. And the reason was, at that point in history in Turkey, like the other parts of the global South, there was an extreme political unrest. And yet, there was such a huge conflict on the political arena. And yet everybody was very clear about why there's this, bloodshed, so everybody had a very, very clear recipe for the solution, yet there was no solution. So, and I was thinking one needs to study all that stuff. How can you know what is really best for this society? We need to understand the society, and all the recipes, particularly the political recipes, were lacking a critical component. That was gender. Gender was missing in on all these left-wing, right-wing, Islamic wing recipes, which made me think, well, come on, there's such an important component, and you can't really miss it if you want to solve or at least, shed light on what is going on in Turkey. So my critical, I guess, the original motivation was I wanted to understand what is going on in Turkey. I still do. How many years? 78, 2012. After too many years, I'm still curious about what's going on in Turkey, and I'm still very curious about. I'm still very curious about the fact that all these macro theories are really falling short when it comes to non-Western societies. So that kind of made me move towards more qualitative research, more like grounded, and then I found my theory, grounded theory, so that I can do like bottom-up research and hopefully make a better understanding of, rather than trying on the ready-made schemas on the Turkish society. So I did do a lot of quantitative research as well. So I did test the hypotheses in the old-fashioned way as well, but only in the areas that I'm extremely comfortable about, and when the data is available.
Yes. So
most of my research is qualitative research.
So, it sounds like, it was the kind of economic, political, social context of Turkey in that time and your kind of desire to make sense of it, but also that from even that beginning, that gender was central to what you were thinking about.
It was very central, yeah.
And all these years later, you do policy work now. You actually, are in a place where you are interjecting that gender component into people's solutions for.
Because part of the reason was all these recipes, the political recipes regarding the inequalities that women have been experiencing in Turkey, they were having this women's economic independence as the most critical component. And in my family, I'm coming from a professional family. My father was a doctor and my mother was a lawyer. And so even though she was a professional, she was earning her own money, and maybe even more than my father did, still there was gender inequality in our household. Mm-hmm. Especially, I mean, in their relationship. When it came to children, they wanted us to do, whatever we wanted to do. They didn't really limit us on anything. But to me, that was interesting. No, women's economic independence doesn't really solve the issue. Still, there is gender inequality. So I need to, know more or learn more about this whole thing. And as you said, after so many years, I'm still doing the very same thing.
So, Dr. Cindoglu, I generally ask our interviewees for 3 reasons that they were drawn to sociology, and you just actually gave us many fascinating reasons. Yes. But is there anything else that you would add to what you've just said?
No, I think the situation in Turkey, the gender inequality that I observed from my immediate milieu, made me, kind of push towards sociology. And the college that I went to was like liberal arts colleges in the United States. So you were just entering to the college, and then you were, as an undecided, liberal arts, and then you were picking up your major. And there were many other more prestigious majors like business or economics or political science or psychology. But I was very adamant that I wanted to do sociology. So, and I was lucky.
And what is your assessment of the situation right now with undergrad students in sociology in Turkey? Of course, there still are more prestigious, majors. And what is interest like among young people in sociology in Turkey?
Well, I have been on the margins of sociology and on the margins of the society in general in Turkey. So probably as a result, I have been on the margin of academia as well. I haven't worked in a sociology department. I have been working at the political science departments in the last 21 years. So I'm kind of in the we don't have a sociology department in this university, and it's a good university, so I have been staying with them. But I don't know what, the sociology students are inquiring now, but what I know is that the students who come to work with me as a PhD student, they are very much interested in understanding the gendered processes of politics. Mm-hmm. Either local, it can be local politics, it can be the party politics, it can be the some aspects of the labor market or secularism. They are still very interested in so the students who are working with me are usually working on the gender issues. Mm-hmm.
And they're coming, so even though it's this many years later, with a similar kind of desire to make sense of the things going on politically and economically in their societies. Yes, yeah. Yes. So, Dr. Cindoglu, the next question that I'd like to ask you a bit about is some of the challenges that you faced over the course of your career. And so when you look back at all the different kinds of work you've done as a sociologist, what would you say have been some of the kind of significant obstacles or challenges that you've dealt with?
I guess the obstacle and the challenge has been, I have always, well, most of the time, probably I did some mainstream work as well. I don't remember right now, but most of my work is on the margins of sociology and on the margins of, most of my work was extremely critical. So even though, for example, my latest work on headscarf at labor market, where I looked at the professional headscarf women's access to the labor market and how they have been discriminated against, the ways in which it was a qualitative research. So I made the discrimination processes observable. So it created a good discussion in the public, but how would I say, the ramifications of the research was that the groups, the Islamist groups who are in favor of headscarf women's education, wasn't really that keen on women's employment. So they kind of kept silent. And the Kemalists, the more progressive, more secularist parts of the society were kind of, again, silent, because now I was like promoting headscarf. It looked as if I was promoting headscarf. So even on that topic, which created lots of publicity in Turkey and in some Europe too, still was in the margins of the politics and in the margins of sociology. And was it a challenge? Yes, it was a challenge, because I think that kind of had an impact on where I stand myself stand on the labor market in Turkey. So it kind of, the type of work that I do marginalized my position as a sociologist. So is that a challenge? Yes. But was it a choice? Yes, it was a choice. That's the first. The second.
Sounds like that part of this challenge is also the challenge of a sociologist attempting to take one's work beyond the academia and actually work with people in society, with different organizations, and how much more complicated that can be than just producing
Exactly.
Professional research.
Yes. And the other challenge is probably raising a child on the side. I'm a single mother. I divorced from her father when she was 3, and my daughter now is 18 years old. So it has been wonderful, but challenging to be a professional but also to be a mother at the same time. So kind of, working out those different needs, different demands of life was and is still challenging.
Yes. So. And it seems like your work very much speaks to that, to the challenges you face personally are very much connected to a lot of the work that you do. Yes. And then, Dr. Cindoglu,
yes.
Can you still hear me? I'm sorry.
Yeah, I can hear you.
Okay. So one challenge then is the nature of your work on the margins, both in terms of on the margins of academia, on the margins of certain kind of political positions.
Exactly.
Your own kind of personal challenges of family and incorporating those with work. And what would you say would be the final challenge?
I guess the final challenge is, like everybody else, I'm also growing old. And yet the students that I work with, the undergraduates, they are still 18 years old. So the age gap between me and them is kind of getting wider and wider and wider. And I don't know if it's a challenge, but I'm paying extra attention to be able to catch up with their world so that makes sense of the things that I've been trying to teach. Because I don't consider sociology as something abstract. Rather, I should be able to speak to their everyday life. If I cannot, if I cannot connect them through Facebook or Twitter or the examples like that, then I would lose them. So this has been a challenge, especially in the last probably 5-10 years, because the age gap is getting wider and wider.
But it sounds like, while on the one hand that's a challenge, that you'd also, I would imagine, learn a great deal from your students in the process.
Exactly. And having a teenager at home is another asset in that for that challenge. Yes.
Yes. So, Dr. Cindoglu, there's one last question that we ask of all our interviewees, which is, if you had not gone on this path through sociology and you had not been a sociologist, can you imagine something else that you would have liked to have been doing?
Well, I have been thinking about it, and I really have very marginal, I have answers for you that can be considered extremely marginal. But nevertheless, I'm going to share those answers. When I was growing up, I don't think that I considered being anything but a sociologist or a teacher either in academia or in primary schools, but I wanted to be a teacher. But as the years went by, I guess around maybe in my 30s, it dawned to me that why didn't I study medicine? Because at that time I was working on medicalization, and I was thinking, I could have been a very good physician. I would have a conscience, and I would have been able to think critically, that sort of stuff. Mm-hmm. And also, I would be able to interfere to the lives of the women and make their lives better. Mm-hmm. And then I said, maybe physician is too much of a training, too much blood and stuff. I thought about being a midwife, and that was something that I considered seriously. Maybe still at some point in my life, I might think about, getting some training and be a midwife or hula or, things like that. But the last thing is, I guess I always wanted to be a ballet dancer. If I'm being on the margins of the society, I don't think that I can ever try this professionally, but this is something that that I would have enjoyed if there wouldn't be any stigma attached to this line of occupation.
Yes, I would love to too. I wish I would join you as well on that alternate path. But in terms of the desire to be a doctor, it's also interesting because you've done so much work on the sociology of medicine, on women's health care, reproductive health. So it seems that you have followed those interests in many ways throughout your life anyway. Yeah.
Yes, and then my next project is going to be on the entertainment sector. So I'm going to get a glimpse of the belly dancing.
That sounds fascinating.
Yeah.
I look forward to reading about that. Absolutely.
Thank you very much.
Well, thank you so much for joining us today, Dr. Cindoglu. It's been wonderful having you with us.
Well, thank you for your time, and thank you for having me. Bye-bye.
This has been another Journey Through Sociology with Dr. Dilek Cindoglu. Please join us next time when our guest will be Dr. Tom Dwyer, who will be joining us from Brazil.